You know, I have a story I'd like to tell you about the Mississippi River hoax. Have I ever told you that story, Duncan?
Oh, what hoax?
Oh, at Vicksburg, Porter's fleet included the Queen of the West, the largest ram that the Union Navy had, and a brand new ironclad called the Indianola. Well, the Confederates captured both of them and were planning on using them against Porter. Well, I think Porter was quite humiliated, and he wanted to get even. So that's when he thought of the hoax. The night after the Indianola was captured, he had his men construct out of barges and bales of hay and lumber a ghost ship called the Night Terror. It was twice as large as an ironclad. It was huge. Well, the Mississippi current carried it downstream without a crew. When it rounded the bend, the Confederates could see it heading towards the Indianola. They saw how large it was, and they were terrified. So they scuttled the Indianola. They set it on fire with explosives, and they lost all the armament, the shot, the shells, all the supplies that they were planning on using against Porter.
When did they realize it was a hoax?
Well, when it passed by without firing a shot. The Confederates eventually caught up with it, boarded it, and found out that they had been hoaxed.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rear Admiral David Dixon Porter, and I was the commander of the Mississippi River Naval Forces. Now, I never thought that I would be the commander of forces on any river. Navies belong on the oceans, and our ships were large and powerful enough to sail around the world and go for months at a time without reaching port. But rivers, where a man could see from side to side and the water is so shallow that he could walk across it, that is no place for the Navy. You see, our strategy during the war was to barricade every southern port that we could to prevent the Confederates from getting ammunition and weapons and even food. Generally speaking, our ships could not pass the ports into the rivers. Of course, the Mississippi was the exception to that rule, wide and deep enough in spots that it was almost a sea unto itself. In 1862, my brother, Admiral Farragut, and I sailed up the Mississippi and we captured New Orleans. The following year, I commanded a fleet that besieged Vicksburg, and my monitors and ironclads and rams were powerful enough that we maintained that siege until Vicksburg fell. I guess after that, the Army thought, well, Red River is going to be easy. Only the Army would imagine that an ironclad could maneuver in 6 feet of water. Now I know some say that I did not even try on the Red River, but that is not true. I know what they said about me behind my back, that I suffer from the Porter infirmity. That is, that I and my father and my grandfather before me had a tendency to exaggerate our own accomplishments and to diminish those of others. Secretary of War Stanton famously called me a gas bag and said that I blew my own trumpet and stole credit to him along with others. But that man went through the entire war without facing anything more terrifying than his own mother-in-law. And if you want to judge me, I would say, look at who my friends were and what their place was in history. And everyone knows that I was great friends with William Sherman, Grant, and that Abraham Lincoln wrote letters of commendation on my behalf. But enough of that. We're here to discuss the Red River Campaign. Duncan, could you help me out with this map, please? Right away, the navigation of the river was a bigger problem than the enemy troops. Our maps were completely unreliable, and for some reason, we could not get good information from the local residents. Now, I met up with Banks in Alexandria, as you well know, and I followed him up with as many ships as we passed the rapids at Alexandria to a little spot called Grand Ecore, right about here. Now, for some reason, Banks decides to leave the river road then. Why, I don't know. But the plan was that we would meet up at Shreveport 2 days hence. So, at about this spot here, as I proceeded up the river, we find a large riverboat scuttled across the river, and there was no removing it in any amount of time. We really had no choice but to wait there. Water level began to fall, and soon enough we found out that Banks had fought and lost at Mansfield, retreated to Pleasant Hill, and abandoned the campaign entirely. Well, we didn't have any choice but to retreat at that time. And it was quite a harrowing journey back to Grand Ecore. We started taking fire right away from the troops who had defeated Banks in Mansfield. And by the time we got to halfway to Grand Ecore, it was like the shot was raining down in buckets on us. Things eased up a mite when we got to Grand Ecore, but when we got there, the Eastport, my finest gunboat, got stuck in the river. Twice. We tried to save her, but it was no use. Finally, we had to load her up with powder and blow her smithereens so the rebels wouldn't get her. Well, the rest of the fleet made it back to Alexandria, only to find a bunch of rocks and no water. Well, I'm going to let Colonel Bailey tell you the rest of that story.
We heard about Mansfield almost right away. We were shocked that Banks had gone inland, had left the river road and gone towards Mansfield.
Well, is it so much longer to get to Shreveport by way of Mansfield?
No, that is not the problem. The problem was water. Between the river road and Mansfield, there is only piney woods. There are no farms. There's no food for cattle. There's no food for the soldiers, and no water. So that the battle at Mansfield was quite disastrous. Banks goes inland, meets with Taylor. Taylor's waiting for him, and it's such a bad thing. I just really think that Taylor must have planted a spy on the river road to tell Banks to go inland. Just like they had one, at Vincent at Henderson Hill.
Well, what happened to take Banks back to the river? Why not wait and fight again?
Mansfield was just a disaster. He did retreat towards Pleasant Hill, though, and it wasn't so bad. There was a story that when they retreated towards Pleasant Hill, the townsmen had all gone to Texas or had joined the war, and there was nothing but the townswomen left. So when the soldiers got to Mansfield, there's a story about Miss Jack Sleet. She had thousands of soldiers come to her house. And they had their hats in their hands. And they didn't know, they said, please feed us, please feed us. And so her overseer, he was an Englishman, he said, we'd better feed them. So they opened up their pantries. Well, of course, all the other women folk in the town of Mansfield, or Pleasant Hill, opened up their pantries and fed the Union soldiers. Now, this helped them to rest and recuperate. Taylor is resting over at Mansfield. He returns to the battlefield, and nobody's there because Banks has already retreated. So,
Well, I'm not surprised that Banks's men were ready to fight at Pleasant Hill and did better than at Mansfield. But my God, Father, to march to Mansfield with no water, lose at Mansfield, a draw at Pleasant Hill, and then back to the river, the Union troops must have been so angry as to be uncontrollable. How many men did they have with them?
well, Banks started out with 35,000 and left 5,000 in Alexandria, to protect the ships. So I don't know what the Union losses were at Mansfield and Pleasant Hill, but there were approximately 30,000 Union soldiers in retreat towards Alexandria.
Even if losses were great, that's a very, very large number of angry troops coming at Alexandria and retreating.
They got here to Tyrone on May the 5th. It was thousands of blue uniforms coming from the north. They were, it was a sea of blue, and they were carrying torches. We were barricaded downstairs. Me and the two ponies, Uncle Willie and Aunt Lily. The Union came in and just ransacked all the upper floors. They burned the corn crib, the chicken houses, the cotton gin, the wharf. They just were, and 500 bales of cotton. I mean, they destroyed my life, my life's work. We stayed barricaded downstairs for 2 weeks while troops roamed the countryside.
Dad, remember, we are still here. Tyrone survived.
We did. I'd like Colonel Bailey to tell us about that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Bailey. I'm an engineer assigned to the 19th Corps of Major General William B. Franklin. I'm an engineer by trade. I don't have any formal education or what you would expect from an engineer today. I learned about engineering by experiencing it and doing what came naturally to me. I was originally born in Ohio and moved to Wisconsin and settled in the town of Kilburn City, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not real different than Louisiana. You have a lot of water here, you have a lot of water in Wisconsin. As you remember, the Mississippi River starts in Minnesota, where it's about 3 feet deep. It runs, doesn't really become big until it forms the western border of Wisconsin. And then it runs 2,000 miles to form the eastern border of Louisiana. I must say that it's been a grand opportunity to be at the other end of the Mississippi and see what happens when the silt and the water from both sides of the continent come together. I'm sorry about the circumstances that have gotten me here, but nevertheless, it's a wonderful opportunity. I think it's fantastic. Water, It's been the most fabulous part of my life. Everything I've ever done has had to do with water. Cutting channels, building bridges, dams, doing anything I can to make the water work for us. I came to New Orleans right after General Banks arrived, and I was assigned to to a duty to repair the levees and help reinforce them. I also went with General Banks to Port Hudson, where we built some embankments, and then I built a dam. We floated 2 steamships out of what appeared to be a mud hole. It was really a small creek. I've got to tell you, your levee system here is amazing. It goes up and down the Mississippi and the Red River, and that Indian River, what do you call it? The Atchafalaya? Yes, by glory, a man could work a lifetime on the levees here in Louisiana. I just try to figure out where the water flows and where it wants to flow. Water has been a big part of my life. When I got the opportunity to see the Red River, it intrigued me. I saw that this river was going to be a serious problem for Admiral Porter. You see, I'm a riverman. The Admiral's an ocean man. No, let me restate that. I'm a riverman. The Admiral's a shipman. He knows his ships and what they can handle. And we both knew that his ships were in for a very hard time when we got to Alexandria. We arrived in Alexandria, and the water level was very low. Admiral Porter and I had to discuss the situation, and he ultimately decided he was going to strip his ironclads because he couldn't get them above the falls and up to Shreveport. He stripped the boats, and when I say strip, I mean remove the iron plates, ammunition, guns, anchors, everything. And by doing so, he was able to move 12 gunboats and 20 transports north of the falls. The Army, some of the new recruits, must have thought the Navy was crazy. They were young, they didn't really follow orders, they just watched. And I think they thought maybe it was some kind of vindictiveness for confiscating the cotton that was taken by the Navy before General Banks arrived. The trip back was a different matter. Many of the troops had been transported on the transports up the river. Trip back, the river was 6 feet lower. So the troops had to retreat on ground that had already been trampled. Taylor was in close pursuit and was harassing them with gunfire. Any forage that was left had been burned by the local citizens. Anyone who looked could see that the ships were high and dry at Grand Ecore. We lost 3 gunboats on the way back to Alexandria. I had an idea, but no one would listen until we got to Alexandria. The water level at the falls was 3 foot 4 inches. I put forth my idea that we could build a dam to raise the water level and get the boats, the ships out of the river. General Franklin thought that it was a good idea and presented it to General Banks, who authorized me to go ahead and proceed. I started construction immediately. We had 3,000 troops, and we had them start to bring in stone, dirt, trees, whatever we needed to start construction of the dams. What you need to understand is the river in Alexandria, and I have these maps. this will help maybe to explain this a little bit. We had two sets of falls in Alexandria, the upper falls and the lower falls. They're about a mile apart. The upper falls, the lower falls, had a distance of 758 feet between each shore. They also had a current that flowed at about 9 miles per hour. If you know anything about rivers, that's pretty fast. I proposed that we build wing dams on both sides of the river so that they come out from the Pineville and the Alexandria side with a gap in the middle. Pineville side, we had men from Maine, Wisconsin, and New York start to fell trees. There were plenty of trees on the Pineville side, and we built a tree dam. And I think if you have on your table, you may have a picture of what a tree dam looks like. The Alexandria side had very few trees, so we ended up building a crib dam. And this dam was completed by the 19th Union Colored Troops. This left a gap in the center of 150 feet. And what we did was we took coal barges, 4 coal barges, and built a crib dam. We sunk them. I instructed that one of the barges only be partially filled. All of the barges were actually anchored to the riverbed. We started this process on April 30th. By May the 6th, the water had risen to 4 feet. By May the 8th, the water was at 5 feet. And several of the smaller boats were able to come across and exit the reservoir. On May the 9th, at 5:30 p.m., 2 of the barges broke loose. It created a torrent of water gushing through a 66-foot gap in the dam. Porter immediately authorized the Lexington to steam over the rapids of the upper dam, come down, and shoot the gap. The Lexington had a wild ride through the gap to the cheers of soldiers on shore. In addition to the Lexington, 2 monitors and a tin-clad made it out. So now we had 5 ships below the falls. On May the 12th and 13th, I ordered at that point in time that we build 2 more wing dams and ultimately a bracket dam at the upper falls so that we get the additional 8 ships out of that area. On May the 12th and 13th, we got the additional 8 ships out. We got 2 ironclad gunboats, 2 city gunboats, a tugboat, 2 tugboats, and a monitor, which was the rest of the fleet. So we got all of the ships out of the reservoir. Since there were reporters attached to this campaign, I received national acclaim. Today, pretty much the only thing that stands out in history of the Red River campaign is Bailey's Dam. I was recognized as a hero. Congress promoted me to Brigadier General. Was recognized as one of 14 civilians who was given an official thank you by Congress for their actions in the Civil War. General Porter wrote me a very, very nice report, which Congress looked at and promoted me to Brigadier General. Porter presented me with a Navy sword. His men presented me with a $3,000 purse and a beautiful punch bowl from Tiffany's in New York. The bowl was engraved with the ships in the fleet, the dams, and it was adorned with alligators. Today, it resides in a museum in Kansas. Frankly, I don't know how it got there. I was murdered in March of 1867. I couldn't find work in Wisconsin, so I moved to Missouri, where I was elected sheriff because I was the hero who had saved the Union fleet. I went after two men for wrestling hogs. I knew these men, so I thought I could bring them in. I was wrong. Funny, you know? You know so much about water, dams, and bridges, but nothing about people. They found my body a month later, face down, in a creek, with a bullet in the back of my skull. It's amazing how heroes can live on in history, but heroes can die in obscurity. Tell that to my wife and 5 children that I left behind. So much for heroes.
Well, Father, you have had such an interesting life. You've seen the Mexican-American War, been a pioneer traveler to a brand new state, been the father of Louisiana State University, and seen the Civil War and the Red River Campaign, complete with the predicament of the U.S. Navy, trapped on a river, even if you were 10 miles away and locked in your house with 2 ponies.
I would not trade my life for the world. Mine eyes have seen a beautiful family, the creation of a great plantation. Mine eyes have seen a terrible, terrible war. To lose children, brothers fighting brothers, fathers fighting sons. Mine eyes have seen a lot of sorrow. It's even seen this is the seminary on the $100 bill, Confederate, worthless and more. But also on the back, I'd like you to join me in what else my eyes have seen. Could I have the crew out here? The cast members?